So hello.
It's over to you.
What would you like to know?
About your trip to China, please.
Anything. So I went to Huawei, and has everybody heard of Huawei? If you turn over the back of your mobile phone, chances are it's built by them. So they're quite a big manufacturer of telco goods and networking equipment, and they also build enterprise systems. And the reason I went there is to basically help them with architecture, software architecture. So like most organizations, they've got big teams doing lots of stuff, and they want to improve the way that they're thinking about software development. So that's primarily why I was there.
Somebody saw you.
Yeah, so I actually spoke at a conference in the same city, Shenzhen, in China, in 2011, I think it was. But that's actually not where this lead came from at all. It turns out that one of the guys who works in Shenzhen saw me speak at a conference in London. And then, a year goes past, and suddenly they were trying to do something. He thought, oh, let's get Simon in. Yeah, so I guess the simple background is I'm a software developer. That's been my professional career for a number of years. Studied computer science at university, met my wife, stayed and worked in London for about 12 years, I guess. Mm-hmm. And then we moved back here in 2008 with our kids. And I continued doing the development thing for a few years, and then I went freelance in 2010, I think. And most of my freelance work is either very short-term consulting or training or conference speaking stuff. So that's what I do at the moment. Yeah, so which book? Yeah, good question. I wrote a number of books when I was in London, about 2000, 2002-ish, primarily about Java. And then I had a break for a while because I guess we had kids. And then I started writing another book about 3 or 4 years ago. So that's my software architecture book. That's actually been translated into Chinese. So in China, China's the only place. No, I didn't do that. No. I hope it's an accurate translation. I have no idea, of course, no way of telling. So China's the only place you can get a printed copy of my book. And I started writing another book last summer, which is a kind of variation on the theme. And that's more around the software architecture diagramming side of things. Not really. The obvious difference is the language barrier. And we did a number of things. We had some smaller meetings. We had a kind of large auditorium session, which was live translated, so 2 people in a little kind of booth thing, live translating through headsets. And then I ran a 2-day workshop for about 30 people. And again, we had a translator sat next to me most of the time. But a third of the people could converse in English.
You didn't have the translators waving at you every time you came up with a technical word. They struggling to translate.
No, not at all. No, it worked really smoothly. But language aside, its audience is pretty much the same as I see elsewhere in the world. Yeah. So I've never met one. That's the irony here. So when I did the conference in China 2-3 years ago, the translators weren't from a software background, and the same thing happened this time as well. So every so often I'd throw her like a kind of deeply tech term in, and she would go, "What does that actually mean?" So you have to do the definition of terms so someone in the audience could explain.
Maybe that's a maturity thing, because obviously farmer side has been there for
Right. Yeah, it could be.
decades, so maybe it's coming up. I don't know. But,
And of course, we're introducing new tech terminology every week. Which doesn't help if you're a.
But do they learn tech in English? I mean, do they code it? When you're coding, I'm not a coder in Java. Is all the code actually English functions?
Yeah. It's all the same character set stuff. The comments might not be in English.
So they just by the fact that they're interested in, or they are computer programming, they must have a reasonable understanding of English.
And certainly most of them seem to be able to understand English, because we would do like me speak a couple of sentences, and you can see them nodding, and then the translator would repeat it in Chinese. And although some couldn't ask questions in English, they're certainly able to read it.
Did you notice any differences between their setup and how they work compared to Europe places? Were there any like stark differences?
Didn't really look too much into it, to be honest. I mean, I was only here for 3 days. The one things that did strike me is that I think it's fairly common in China. They have a siesta between 12 and 2, so it's like a 2-hour lunch period. And it was weird. When I was in the office at 12 midday, the lights went off, and that was like a sign to move outside. Yeah, I think it was 8 till 6 or something. So it was like 8 till 12, and then 2-hour break, 2 till 6, 2 till 5, something like that.
I think you mentioned when we were talking about this previously that you thought that the software teams are quite large
Yeah.
by comparison to
Yeah.
Western. Do you think that had any impact on either the problems they face or anything else, or was that just a cultural thing?
They mentioned some of the teams were 500 people, which is quite a large team, and I'm not sure if that's one team building one piece of software.
So that's supposed to be more of a battalion than a team.
Yeah, but scale is certainly going to hinder, not help.
Did that come through in any of the problems you were working with them on?
Not particularly. It's one of those things we kind of skirted around a little bit. They are building some fairly big products. You know, things like operating systems for mobile devices. So you've got the core OS team, and then you've got all of the other teams who are working on the different parts of the OS and the apps and things. So yeah, coordination of those teams as well. Yeah, it didn't seem massively different to other countries I've visited. But again, I was only here for 3 days, and kind of in isolation. I never kind of got to see what anybody was doing.
Do you think a lot of them are trained in the UK?
No,
Or do you think
I think they're pretty much all trained locally. Some of the people I spoke to have definitely been outside of China and visited conferences, and because Huawei is such a big organisation, they've got nearly 200,000 people worldwide. They do have offices around the world, so there's a little bit of travel. I think it's mostly a Chinese thing.
How much in the way of these referrals do you think are coming off your books as opposed to conferences?
It's hard to tell. It's probably like a 50-50 split, to be honest. Normally when people email me, they say, we saw your conference talk, or we saw your YouTube video, or we bought your book. And it's a fairly even split between all those sorts of things. So writing books is a great way to get business.
But you've got a lot coming up this year already, haven't you?
Yeah. So I'm going to Atlanta in 10 days to speak at a conference there. I'm doing a workshop, a keynote, and a talk. So that's going to keep me busy for a bit. March, I'm doing a go-to night in Copenhagen. April, we're going to Venice. I'm doing an invited talk at a research academic conference. So yeah, I've got a bunch of stuff already in the calendar, and it's only 3rd of February.
This is your quiet period.
Yeah, this is the quiet period. I normally do no travelling at all in January and February. First trip, China.
So you'll be fine till you get fed up with the travelling.
There are ways to make it possible.
You're doing Skype on that, aren't you, as well?
Yeah, that's good point. So there's an online collaborative conference targeted at the Brazilian software developers, and it's like a virtual thing. So I'm recording a 1-hour slot to throw into their series of talks. So that's March as well. So I'm not supporting applications. That's the simple answer. So I've moved away from building software on a day-to-day basis, and I'm really just doing the short-term training consulting stuff. Right. Having said that, I am building my own software as a service product startup thing. So that is something I need to support, but that's fairly easy to do from anywhere. And thankfully, it's just one system, not a whole bunch of systems. Yeah,
You've got your own system
how to draw pictures, basically. Yeah, I teach people how to draw pictures.
Which is kind of, unique. It's not something.
The C4 model.
Yeah.
Is that basically a set of diagram templates? People
It's-
know how to string them together. I know I should know this because I should have read your book. I've totally lost it.
Can you read Chinese?
Yeah, could you? I've got the Chinese version. You can have a look. So it's not a collection of templates. It's a way to think about the structure of a software system. So from the high level down to the code and some steps in between, and that's all it is. And then once you have a structure, you can then draw pictures at each level in turn. It's nothing more than a set of hierarchical building blocks diagrammed individually.
Is this entirely your own creation, or is it influenced by other things?
It's definitely been influenced by other things, but this is the way I've always drawn diagrams, really, and the way I've always thought about systems. It's very much a kind of developer's perspective upwards approach rather than an architecture down approach. So that's why I think a lot of teams like it, because when they're drawing these diagrams out, they can show it to their developers, and the developers can say, oh yeah, I can see how this actually matches what we've got in the code base. So it's kind of shrinking the gap between the physical layout of the code and the logical concepts that people think about when they're describing software.